In an earlier video, we talked about the dangers of a politicized military. And while that's very true, it's also true that all war is inherently political. And when I say that, I'm not saying that the troops themselves are part of a political party, but rather that war is a continuation of politics by other means. When we go to war, it's not just declaring, oh, we want to kill those guys, we hate them. It is done in order to achieve some policy goal. And we need to make sure that when we're waging war, we are still waging war in a way that supports that political goal. Otherwise, what's the point, right? And when we have that discrepancy and people on the ground don't understand that higher level goal, we get people saying things like, oh, the politicians wouldn't let us win, and kind of that disgruntled nature that we've probably heard before. And while we certainly want to make sure that we can criticize and have a good exchange of ideas and what the best way is to achieve our political goals, sometimes we just really need to make sure that we are making good tactical decisions that actually support those political goals and not just doing the things that we want at the tactical level. So, for example, in a good policy would be to build trust with civilians. If we're doing more stability operations and trying to quell a civil war, to stop violence in the streets, troops are going to have a very restricted ROE. You're not going to be just shooting people in the street because they think they pose a threat, even if that exposes your guys to a little bit more danger, because the goal is to build trust with the civilians and to create rule of law, not to just kill the enemy. And sometimes being harsh with that rules of engagement can actually lead to more of an insurgency, more violence, which is counterproductive to the overall political goals. Another idea is proving to allies that you can win. If you're an underdog fighting with your neighbor, perhaps something like Ukraine, sometimes you may need to destroy a symbolic target and spend ammunition and manpower trying to achieve that goal so that you can make headlines in the news around the world showing that you achieved some sort of symbolic victory, rather than just doing perhaps a more conventional approach that is probably better in the long run. If you go back to like Desert Storm, the Iraqis were burning the Kuwaiti oil field. So if you're trying to preserve a nation's economic power as you repel an invader, you may decide that you need to secure infrastructure and access routes rather than targeting the enemy forces. Even though, the military's job is you want to get the bad guys, you want to achieve that battlefield victory, sometimes the goals may be to preserve that infrastructure rather than going and fighting the fight. So keep that in mind. Make sure that your tactics and your decisions on the battlefield actually support what the higher level goal is, because if it's out of sync, you're never going to win the fight.